morning from Toronto and good afternoon from Delhi and Milano. We are here together on another episode of Design to Connect. For those listeners that are very interested in looking at architecture from a different lens, I promise you that this conversation is going to be a very interesting one, as we will be connecting with three inspiring women that collaborated together along with the other co-workers to make social design collaborative initiative happen. Welcome, Anushka, Nishtha, and Swati that will be joining us after.
So for the ones who are not seeing us and are just listening to us, we have Anushka and Nishtha here with us now. And Swati will join us later, as Adil said. So hi, girls. How are you doing today? And can you tell us where are you based in? And like, where are you connecting with you now?
Yeah, so hi everyone. So I'm Nishtha. I'm from Delhi only, and like our practice also based in Delhi. And
I am Anushka. I am sort of based between the transition of I'm transitioning between Mumbai and Delhi. I live in Delhi. I live in Mumbai, but sort of practicing in Delhi. And both of us are architects by profession, and we have been working here since almost a year now at Social Design Collaborative, which is again a practice based out of Delhi. Yeah.
Okay. This episode is so exciting because we are all girls, so I'm really excited and really great to meet you both. So we will start with introducing the both of you. So I'll go with Anushka. Anushka, you are an architect, urban researcher at Social Design Collaborative, as well as the founder of AMCHI. Am I saying it correct? Okay, which is a mentoring design and research platform centered around embedding culture and critical thinking within architecture. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
And hello, Nishtha. You are an architect as well that's based in Delhi and graduated of the University School of Architecture and Planning. You've been working with the Social Design Collaborative team for over a year. And most of your projects that you worked on were to improve the built environment and the lives of marginalized communities in Indian cities. So welcome, and we're so glad to have both of you on our conversation today.
Yeah, likewise.
So, to give you a heads up of this episode's dynamic, Arizu and I designed specific questions that we're going to be asking you, targeted towards either one of you or the both, based on the inspiration that we got inspired based on your biographies. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So our first question today is that we were thinking that we would like to know more about your journey. Tell us more about the choice of your educational route and how you feel that it's shaping your career or it's shaping you as a person today. We've been noticing that, when we listen to people's journeys and reasonings from some of the choices that, they took in life, it gives us an understanding that really there's no linear way in doing something. Everyone has a completely different perspective for doing a certain choice in life. And it helps us a lot to learn from others' journeys. So considering that you both started working and doing meaningful work, can you please share with us how it all started and give us some inspiration here?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah. I can start. So, I mean, I actually never thought that I want to do architecture for any particular reason. But when I started studying architecture, when I was in those 5 years of my graduation, studying architecture, exploring things, that whole process, I realized a lot of things. If I share a very personal sort of experience, it's I've seen students, my batchmates and different architecture students around me, always designing some sort of a fancy things and some nice designs. They are good designs, but for me it was always important to design something, a design solution which is solving something, it's a problem solving solution, it's a cost based sort of a solution. So my inclination, was always towards that. I want to create something, I want to give a design solution to a problem which actually helps someone, that sort of a thing, that sort of an inclination developed with time, as more like, I was trying to, when I was sort of figuring out. So by the time my graduation was like near completion, I sort of developed this thing that I want to do something more meaningful for me. So that is why that is when all this ideology started building inside me, like that I feel like architects can actually make a lot of difference. They can actually do a lot of things that can bring a positive change around us, in our society. So that has always like given me a direction to move ahead. So for me that was really important, and that's why the work that we are doing is very sort of personal to me. So that's why that's all where it came from, basically, for me.
Thank
Very
you.
nice. Thank you for sharing.
I mean, for me, it was sort of, I think, more or less on the same lines. I was actually born in Ulhasnagar, which is like a refuge. It was actually a refuge colony built for the Sindh refugees post the partition of Pakistan and India in 1947. So I mean, my ancestors came and sort of settled in Ulhasnagar. And I mean, the city was sort of, located beyond, the conglomeration of Mumbai. It was in the outskirts, because it was considered that, these are people who are outsiders and, so, sort of are a threat to us. So, the approach to, I mean, we were Hindus, but, we were on the other side of the line. I mean, as a result, after the partition, it became a very fuzzy, like, where do you draw the line? Because we are Hindus, but we were residing on the other side of the country. But now that's become a separate country, a separate entity. And while growing up, I almost experienced a very community life, because we were a very small, minority. And for us, living together was our, our strength, because even like more than we were also scared about, what's going to happen to us, because we almost left everything there and came to start out from scratch. We almost didn't have anything. Our land was gone, our culture was gone, our occupation was gone, right? And since like living in Ulhasnagar is also considered to be one of, the largest, most densely populated cities, and it's like, the people have built the city by themselves. It's not like the state built it for them or funded in any way. Like, it was like given in terms of mere plots, and the plots were sort of being developed and charted out by the people themselves. So like, I experienced a sense of community living, the sense of living together. Like, the entire city was like my, my own relative, like my own sort of people, And while sort of studying architecture, it inherently became, my way of thinking, because it was so important for me to think about what's happening around me, what's happening with the people around me. Like, the building became almost not so important for me, but how I think about like the relationship between the environment and the people was a very immediate sort of lens for me to think about. And that also sort of led me to start my own initiative, Amchi. That sort of started as a student when I was studying architecture. It became like, okay, very important for me to think about my own neighborhood where I was living. And that sort of, I mean, I felt that there was certain need that I also wanted to learn from my peers who had more experience, dealing with communal issues and issues of the community. And that sort of led me to, work at Social Design Collaborative and sort of look at more urban specific issues, or look at more like broader issues that could be not only solved through architecture, but a sort of a very sensitive approach to advocacy, maybe, or through art, or like architecture becomes a very small component of that.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Wow, thank you.
Sorry. Go on.
No, I'm just gonna say something very quickly, because I want to applaud you for thank you for sharing, first of all, both of you, your stories. And I think as we were mentioning offline, that it's very unfortunate, like when we live all around the world, we don't know much what's happening in different areas around, and today you gave us, an insightful information of what might be happening, with your life somewhere that I would have never known what would have been happening in India. And those are an interesting point to why it's important to connect with people from different worlds, for us to be aware and mindful of what's happening around us in the world, So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And one thing that was interesting for me is that you said about architecture becoming a smaller part of like the whole picture.
Yeah.
Like architecture becomes a tool, not the main goal. Like you don't, I don't know, try to work towards being an architect, but you work towards having an impact, and architecture will become a part of like a tool for this impact. So I think that was really interesting. And thank you for talking about Armchain, because the next question that I want to ask Nishtha is about Anushka, is about that. I saw the name, under your faces, and I went directly to Nishtha. So I wanted to ask you about the importance of questioning and critical thinking when it comes to architecture, because I think we are in a culture that maybe doesn't encourage so much critical thinking or questioning in general. Like we are very sticked to our current ways of doing things, especially architecture. Like there's a very linear approach towards architecture, and that's the main way that we see it. So I wanted to ask you, why did you put critical thinking as one of the central elements in Armchain, in your platform, and why do you think it is really important for us, especially in this day and age, to have a critical thinking in architecture? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think like not just critical, you have to be thinking, because I think building is so political, right? And I mean, this also sort of comes in through my own sort of experience. Like, I mean, when I was sort of talking about Ulhasnagar, when, we were living in Ulhasnagar, my grandparents loved it there because, literally they knew everyone knew everyone. It's like you step out of the house, you have a person calling you, and that's, your relative asking you for, maybe some chutney or some papad, like, or some food that they need, you don't have it, so then you ask them. It's like sort of, like almost exchanging not only commodities, but also, your stories, your grief, your happiness, everything, right? And for my father, it was always about, sort of like, I mean, the city is also considered to be like a civic shame, because it's so populated, it's so packed, the roads are not wide enough. So we moved to an immediate suburb, right? Because, it had like better living condition, it had, better amenities. But I think for I mean, that led to, me to think that why was it that my grandparents, when we moved to, a better place, why did they still, always wanted to go back? So I mean, I feel that it was like the social susceptibility of the city that, led the city to be a, like Ulhasnagar, if you like translate, it means like Ulhas means happy and Nagar means city. So, I mean, it's almost in contradictory to the form of the city, but, the name is sort of very like happy. And that's like because of the people, because of the connections, that's what sort of makes, the city. And when we talk about like city planning, city making, and our smart city proposals, they completely ignore that sense of, how people operate within the city. How do people use the city? How does one, how does the city function? How does an environment shape us? Those kind of like memory, that lost sort of nostalgia is almost disappearing in more and more sort of planned environments, right? So, I mean, that was sort of that led to, for me to think beyond what was already taught to us in architecture college, like in architecture school. Like, okay, we've been taught to, design something, but why was designing so important? Because, I mean, for me, it was almost like, do we even need to design something? Because, sometimes people design their own things and they are like, working in so much better capacity as, as we can imagine. So I think like those sort of instances led me to think more critically, or I mean, just put it in that sense, like led me to think beyond what was already taught to us. And I mean, and that sense of critical thinking is also something that we practice in our own sort of practice here right now. Is I mean, because we work with communities that are, very, very precarious. Most of them live on the threats of evictions, displacement. So I mean, I think operating, with them, critical thinking becomes like an apparatus, because if you're not thinking about their life, or you're not thinking about their precarity, you're almost ignoring that. I mean, how can you operate if you don't sort of understand their local condition, or understand how they're operating, or understand their everyday precarity? And I mean, I'll just there I want to give you an example of what I'm trying to also say is that we currently working on a project in Yamuna. Yamuna is a river in Delhi, which sort of cuts through the entire city. And farming is, predominantly being practiced there ever since the independence, And recently, the farmers have been evicted there, being sort of as pollutants of the river. And that's not the case, because, they're almost living with the river. They're taking care of the river. They're growing with the river, right? And it's an anti-development sort of an idea, because the development in quote unquote, it means that world-class city where have large golf sort of areas, and big grounds and parks and stuff like that. And that's not really how the image that they want to portray of the capital of India. Like, it's farming is happening in the city. That's something so bad, And there, when we sort of, planning out the bottom up land uses, we had to name.
Oh no, I think we lost the connection.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, ladies.
Okay, you're back.
Okay, we can carry on.
Okay. So I mean, the project sort of revolved around, mapping the bottom, existences, and the bottom up, like it was all about like what exists on ground is what we had to map. And we had to locate, the bastis which are not being showed up in the development plans and master plans. And then, the naming of those bastis became so important for us, because, we couldn't name a person, we couldn't name an entity, because that's going to come out, maybe they can evict them very easily, or maybe they can catch hold of them very easily. So, naming those bastis. And it's also related to a lot of power. Like some people want to assert their sense of power, that we belong on this land, and, we have to name the land on our name. So it was this constant negotiation between, what to call it, what people know, and is it like really safe to put it out there, So, I mean, there you have to have that sense of thinking, because that's how you're operating. Otherwise, you're dismantling the existing system, right? So I think like that sort of, that's what I sort of wanted to bring out with critical thinking.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's crazy that like mostly all the ideas of, I don't know, modernism is exactly against what brings well-being for the society in general. And we are so stick to it, and we are so scared of like being not called modern or civilized, that we put the well-being of people in danger, or well-being of our society. So critical thinking, I think, is really important when it comes to an issue like that. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And a lot of people also would assume that, once you start thinking about those little details, that it's a waste of time. And then it's rather than just get to the solution right away, that we avoid that those little details are really what's going to be giving us the sustainable solution at the end of the day, right? Because you understand the foundational problem, and you built up a solution towards it. And I always question to, like, is this something that we need to reconstruct our social and cultural values and teach people, what it means to have critical thinking before we start implementing it? And yeah, I guess I will leave that to another question, because it kind of relates to the power dynamics in like marginalized communities. So we'll keep the listeners entertained till then. But we'll move forward with Nishtha. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Nishtha, yeah.
Nishtha, sorry, apologies for that. So Nishtha, my question to you is that most of the time, especially when it comes to social change, we always associate, or we want to blame, as architects, of course, we want to blame the responsibilities on policymakers or anyone but us, right? Even though I personally think that we are very aware of the responsibilities that we carry. And for that, I wanted to ask you, do you think that we have and should have the social responsibility to bring positive change? And why do you think we have to voice and that our actions actually lead to something? And if you can also share ideas from your experience on how one can start, because Anushka also brought up a point when she was talking about critical thinking, that I feel that there's always a conflict between what architects, what they can do, what they the way that they see things from different lands, versus when policymakers and like the power dynamics come and take control over your ideas. So please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the best sort of scenario is when you're working together, like the different stakeholders, like the different sort of people, like the policymakers, the architects, the maybe social activists, when different people from different realms, different expertise, when come together, collaborate, think together, I think that is when the best sort of solution can come in. And I think, yes, definitely, architects bear the social responsibility, because a lot of built phenomena like shaping around us, the architects play a very important role in that sort of thing. Like, so you take, suppose, like urban development, or city planning, all the authorities that are doing these sort of things, that they have a team of architects, they have a team of with policymakers, and with activists, and all those things, and all those people. So I think the best is when when you're working in collaboration, when working it together, understanding people, understanding different sort of angles, from people who are experts in different sort of realms, different sort of fields. So I think that is like the best scenario, where I feel like, I think architects have a lot of power. They can actually do a lot of things. They can like, suppose, like I want to give you the sort of example, like what we are doing here, like as an architect, how we are trying to sort of do this thing. So like the example that the project that Anushka was also talking about, the river Yamuna. So the project, so it's a research project that we have been working on since a very long time. Like it's been like 2-3 years that we've been working on that. So it's basically like we are questioning the government. We are sort of trying to build up a case where we are asking them, or telling them that you want to build parks, you want to beautify the whole area, but also look at the existing scenario. Like, there are so many people living there. You are just evicting them, but where will they go? It's also responsibility. It's our responsibility. It's government's responsibility. To sort of look at where will they go. It just, you're not just making them homeless. You're also leaving them without any work. Like, their livelihoods are also getting affected by this whole this sort of plan of beautifying the area, beautifying the river. So we are trying to say that, okay, fine, if you want to sort of do this, also think of the people. Why it has to be parks versus farms, when it can be parks and farms. So that is the problem solving design solution that we can come up with. So that is the, sort of narrative that we are, trying to give to them. We are, building up on this line. So that's where I thought, the city planning, the urban development, these sort of things, like architects can think, architects can come with these sort of solutions. So, so this is something which is possible. This is something which can be done, but only you have to be very sensitive towards these issues. You actually need to understand that this is something which is very important. The livelihoods, the life of people, just because they are from marginalized communities doesn't mean that they don't have rights, that they don't have housing rights or land rights. They do. They are citizens of the country. They do have all these rights. So it's important to think on these lines. And similarly, like if I talk about another project that we worked on a few months back, so it was on a master plan of Delhi. So and every like 20 years we develop the government authority, which is Delhi Development Authority, they make a new master plan, which is like the city planning. So they plan the whole city design, like where will the commercial areas will be, where will be the industrial areas, that sort of thing. So when they are designing the city, when they are coming up with the master plan, so they don't usually engage with people, engage with the communities, engage with what people want. It's their city, they have the right to say what they want. So for this whole idea, for this whole thing to make this city planning more participatory, so we came up with a map based toolkit where we sort of deconstructed the master plan. So master plan is a 400-page document which is not even in any other language, like not even in Hindi, so that people can sort of understand and relate. It's only in English, and it's a very tedious and difficult sort of a document. So we sort of tried to convert it into an interactive, playful sort of a game, map-based game. So we took that kit, and we sort of like went to a lot of communities in Delhi, and we tried to explain people what master plan is, why it is important. So like we have different sort of small activities for different chapters in master plan, like activity on housing, activity on transport system of the whole city, activity on related to livelihood or social infrastructure. So we sort of deconstructed all these difficult chapters into small activities, so that actually issues can come up from the communities, like what they want, what can be done, what can be improved in the city. So it actually resulted, it came out really well. We got a very nice feedback on the whole process, and people actually did participated a lot, and we actually got more than 20,000 suggestions and objections which we could file to the government, so that they can implement those suggestions in the master plan, so that so in this way, like we sort of tried to make the whole process of city planning a bit more participatory and engaging. We took it to the communities which are marginalized and belong to a lower income group, which are most of these communities are left from the planning decisions of the city. So they don't have a voice, so we sort of tried to do that and give that. So we this whole project was in collaboration with a lot of society organizations in Delhi, like around 40 organizations in Delhi. So we all collaborated and gave feedback to each other, and our team designed the toolkit. We did a lot of pilot in different communities, and sort of came up with better solutions and this sort of thing. So I think that was our role in the whole, architect's role in the whole this sort of a thing. So I mean, yeah, so that really is important and fulfilling in that sense.
You speak with so much passion. I hope you know that. Like so much. Like I love it, and I think this is like, thank you. It just inspired my morning more and more. And I appreciate the initiatives that you're making, because this is the only way that you can give people some sense of dignity, to feel that they're a participant of the life that they're living, right? Unfortunately, especially like in marginalized communities, people are so unaware of their rights, or they're so unaware of, you know, how the living conditions, or like the city, or like the space that they live in, how they can contribute to it. And with you teaching them these things, or like making them understand the concepts behind how things are designed, they will feel more at power to design their own lives, right? So I think this is very important. But you know, another thing that you also part of the things that you were mentioning and made me even question more and more is, you know, the idea of this whole collaboration, and us understanding that we can be beneficial in different professions and industries by giving our opinions. And I always wonder, it's because, you know, this is there's this lack of awareness in our educational system. So once you graduate, not only architects, but all other professions that you're working with are unaware that, you know, the architects can do that, can do things for the social well-being of the area that they live in, because we were not taught these things in school. So I wonder whether this is something that creates more conflict or disconnect between us architects and other professions, because they also think that that's what architecture is only supposed to do. And the more and more that we're getting, you know, like now we're 2022, technology took over, a lot of things took over. The definition of of what architecture is shifting. And is this creating more damage, or, you know, I don't know, just all these rumbling in my head.
Yeah, and I think another interesting thing is that, like, okay, in a school, but also in the professional life, we think so much about the problem solving like ability in the architects, or also their communication skills. But so much of both of these two skills are used for branding or for selling your ideas, but we never think that these two skills, how much they can help the community actually. Like with your communication skills, you are able to build trust with the communities and understand what is it that they really want. And also with the problem solving skill, instead of, I don't know, using it to, I don't know, solve the idea of, okay, how can I make this building the most beautiful possible? Not that that is not important, but maybe it can be used also for, I don't know, more important things. And I don't know, sometimes when I really think that architects are really the missing link between the policy making and action, because also in Europe, it happens a lot that people, like also Europe as general, they plan a lot, they make a lot of regulation, but everything stays there, you know, and it doesn't go to action. And the problem is that policymakers don't let architects and designers and artists, you know, who are the, let's say, action makers, I don't know, to be a part of this whole process. So I think that's really also important. Thank you so much to both of you for all the points that you brought up. And really, it felt so great to connect with you both and learn from both of you, because especially because you're young, and not that, okay, we are not discriminative towards age, but it's good to have people in our own age and see what they're doing, because most of our listeners also are the ones who are in our own age, and they're trying to figure out how to be more have a positive impact in the society. So thank you so much for being here, and hope you have a great night, right? Great night ahead of you. And we will take a break, and then we will have a talk with Swati, the founder of Social Design Collaborative. But if you have any last words, anything that you want to say before leaving, we would love to hear that.
I mean, I just wanted to sort of reflect on the last thread where you were talking about, you know, the absence of, you know, architects taking the sort of the role to sort of push forward. I think that's also because of the lack of academia. I mean, when you look at academia, it's sort of, we still, at least in India, sort of the course per se is sort of, approach to the realms of, a draftsman course where, the drawing is given so much importance in terms of like how you draw, how your line weights are, how, you sort of create architecture that's good looking, that's, a solid infrastructure, that we often sort of, do not sort of pay any focus on, how it will actually get implemented, like what are the laws, how would it actually occur to, people? I mean, say for instance, if you're designing a space that is going to cater to 500 people versus a space that's going to cater to 100 people, that sense of scale, that sense of, rational, that sense of reality, we are so far away from it because often we are stuck with the facade or, the position of the toilet, how it's going to look from the outside. We're so sort of, taken away from like that sense of design. Okay, because we're architects, we can make beautiful buildings. I think it's almost like, in today's sort of environment, it's like, I think our course is also very political and we cannot afford to, not have an opinion because we say it or not, we are sort of, shaping the environment, and our environments are also shaping us, not as only, products, not in terms of just producing the buildings, but also someone who's inhabiting them, right? We are also sort of people who are living in these spaces. So I think we often forget that.
Yeah. Sorry, so sorry to, please carry on.
Yeah, I also feel like that the sense of so much importance, that we have so much power. It's not like we are someone with extraordinary skills. It's just that we have that imagination that we can sort of, equip more and more people with. So I think it's time about like Nishtha said, think with people, think, because it's not something, I think, not so powerful. It's just that, that sense of seeing has to go beyond, I think.
Yeah. And not only that, sorry, I want to, even though we said we're going to like, we came towards this end of our segment, but I think it's very important to also include that I think we need to reshift our thinking about what beautiful means, right? This is a social and cultural thing that not only in architecture and life, we always identify beauty with the outer appearance, and we forget about what the inner beauty is, whether we're describing a person, but also if we're describing architecture. Why do we need to use beautiful to describe a building when this is such a subjective thing? And when something is so meaningful, functional, providing so much care, it's not beautiful. This is beautiful by itself, so I think we really need to re-identify what beauty means in our industry, for sure. So that way, beautiful equal action doesn't have to be something grand, whatever that word is, like grandicious or something. Okay, sorry. And Nishtha, any final words from you?
No, I think, it's just like, I think Anushka summed up almost everything, yeah. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
If you were to take action and, start somewhere in changing, because we both agreed that we're starting from the foundations, right? So that's the educational system. And not, of course, there needs to be a lot of changes in the social construct of like, what families are teaching kids and stuff like that. But if we were to start from an educational level, what do you feel, where would you start in making a change? Or what would you start implementing?
If you're talking about I think I feel like what Anushka was also saying, the architectural studies, I think they can do a lot better. They are like teaching in a just one unidirectional sort of a thing. They are not like the teaching they are not actually teaching the problems outside of a bubble, like there are so many things that, and I just feel like, architecture is not a confined box. It's not a confined, sort of a field. It's very vast. It's huge, and you can do so much. You can explore so much, and I just feel like the whole education system can sort of think more about these sort of things. Like what I am like what I'm doing right now. I think it is all how I explore and how I envision things, but it has nothing to do with what I was taught in my whole 5 year of course, my study. So I think we need more people who are more thinking towards these sort of direction, making things more inclusive in every sense. So I just feel like the pedagogy towards how we are teaching architecture in that sense, it can change in the this sort of thing, this sort of direction. And I think it has started to some extent. I can see my juniors from my college who are sort of trying to do some things, not exactly, but they are moving towards this sort of direction where they are trying to figure these sort of things. But I remember in my time, or my seniors, so look at people who were more senior to me, they had a very different sort of mindset towards what they are doing, what architecture means. So I mean, yeah, so I just feel like these sort of things can actually come into this whole education system of like how you are teaching architecture, how you are perceiving it, how you are sort of I mean, just how you are sort of
Thinking
telling
outside of the box.
Thank
yeah
you.
yeah
You are listening to Design to Connect. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be right back.
All right. Welcome back to the second part of our conversation today. And we have Swati here. Hello, Swati. We're so happy to have you with us. How are you, and where are we connecting with you from?
Hello, I'm here in Delhi, and it's nice to be talking to all of you.
Thank you. So before we start asking you a couple of questions, we want to let our audience know a little bit more about you. So you are an architect, artist, and a writer based in Delhi. Your work combines social justice and participatory planning. You are the founder and of the interdisciplinary practice Social Design Collaborative, which was awarded the Beasley Design of Year 2020 in architecture. Your approach combines community engagement and grassroots activism with policy advocacy. And you also teach and have written on urban issues ranging from housing rights to public spaces for City Lab, Scroll, and Indian Express. This explains the energy and the excitement to start learning more about you, which really inspires us. So welcome on our channel.
Thank you, Adil.
Swati, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to our podcast. We know how busy you are, so thank you so much for giving us this time. So with your other teammates, we talked about the importance of critical thinking and the social responsibility that the architects have. So now the question that we wanted to ask you was about the importance of seeing buildings and architecture as a dynamic entity than forcing designs that are, let's say, static. So we are so used to, as architects, to have, I don't know, this celebrity figure that we think that we put our creativity or our ideas somewhere and they have to stay there, the same, without changing, without caring about what the communities want actually and how they want to change it. And so much of this can also come from our ego that we develop also in the architectural schools. So what we wanted to ask you, what do you think we need to change in our way of thinking as architects to embrace the kind of designs that give more freedom to their users and how they develop it over time? And do you think if it's a shift in the ego, and that considering giving this kind of power gives so much like capacity building within the communities, and it can affect the healings of community and their autonomy. Do you think how can we reach as architects to designs that are more dynamic and give more power to the communities that are built for?
Yeah, I think that's a good question to think about when it comes to the state of architecture and also the kind of work that we all are doing. I think the people you're speaking to, the kind of work you yourself are interested in. And I think we draw a lot of the kind of architecture we are able to practice from the people we work with. And because we work in self-organized communities, self-built neighborhoods, informal settlements is the technical word. I think that's where we've also learned the sort of merit of buildings growing with time, right? As people, constantly are building them, repairing them, building them again. Of course, we recognize that it comes from a position of precarity, right? Because of a perceived quote unquote illegality. It comes from a lack of land tenure, right? And so they are in this sort of perpetual, temporariness, perpetual ephemerality, because of which people have to keep building. But if you also think about it, vernacular architecture, traditional architecture around the world is a bit like that as well. It requires constant sort of upkeep and constant maintenance. Just like you and I, we take care of a body, right? There is always repair, and there is always, this sort of constant work which is required. And I think in traditional architecture, we have had that relationship with the buildings that we live in. And I think on one side, maybe we can think that it has to do with the architect's ego, and then, maybe you want to design everything, and it's kind of seen as a sculpture, sort of a thing. But I think it also has to do with how architecture has changed over time. It has to do with the building technologies, with the building materials, and also, industrialization. So in this post-industrial world, the kind of materials that we use are such that give you an idea of permanence, right? So we use metal, we use concrete, but at the same time, I think the more local, traditional sort of materials like stone, like bamboo, like mud, I think they are timeless in a way. I mean, they might not be permanent, but I think they're more permanent if you think about how one is able to keep working with them, keep adding to them, right? So if you have a traditional house, you will like built in wood, or even built in mud and bamboo, you will see that it's been there for 100 years. I mean, that's very common. It's just that like every few weeks, every few months, there is a process of repair which is required, a process of adding to it. And then when it comes to concrete buildings, how long do they last? 40 years, 50 years? That's it. So I think it really depends on how we look at architecture, and also the sort of narrative of development that we have built, right? Which is that if you're building a concrete house, if you're living in a concrete house, that is seen as developed. And I also realized that when I say this, I myself live in a concrete house. So it's also easy to say it. And, will I really live in a mud house? Which doesn't have all the sort of conveniences and the indicators of consumption that a concrete house has. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is that there is a certain hybrid perhaps that we need to work towards, where we can use these local materials, where we have this sort of constant process of building and repair and maintenance, and at the same time it is sustainable, it is affordable. And I think somewhere we have moved away from that. And in working with individuals living in informal settlements, in working with underrepresented groups, I feel we are getting closer to also a more sustainable way of building, which traditional architecture has taught us. And that's why we realized over time that architecture is not a fixed, sort of a rigid entity, or anything that we build is not something that is built and that's it, it's done. It's something which changes with time. It's something which does require constant effort. And I think there we have been really lucky, really fortunate to have good partners that we work with who are very rooted, embedded in the work that they do, in the communities that they work in, and the sort of relationship they have with the space, if it's a school or a daycare center, is a sort of a constant, ongoing one. And yeah, I think this is where we are today. And if you speak to me a few years later, I'm sure I would have been able to add to that thought process a bit more.
Thank you. This actually shows, or like it makes us understand that if something was a solution 5 years ago, it doesn't have to be the solution 5 years down the road, but you can enhance on that solution, based on the circumstances that you're or the situation that we're in today. So, Arizu and I both feel that architecture in today's world, the way that we practice it, is such an isolated field. And especially when you walk into our architectural offices these days, we feel that, the only people that you're seeing are people that are graduated from architectural school, and they're so isolated within their workstation. But in your practice, you and the rest of the team try to work with people from different professions, and hence there's like that collaboration. Why do you think it's very important for us to embrace this change and move towards a more interdisciplinary approach when it comes to architecture? And do you think that it's possible to rework the structure of existing architectural offices to adapt to something more collaborative?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think we work with non-architects because it also teaches us not to take ourselves too seriously, because I think architects we take ourselves very seriously, right? We like to wear black, and we like to have this, very sort of cool or mysterious air about us. I'm sure like maybe every profession has it in one way. And the more we work with people from different backgrounds, the more we sort of exit the silos that we have been working in. But it's definitely made our approach so much richer, working with people who bring different skills, different understandings. So in working with human rights lawyers, in working with economists, sociologists, activists, social workers, there is just so much unlearning in the field of architecture that we have gone through, and so much, of course, learning when it comes to socioeconomic and urban political realities, which perhaps architects don't look at very much. I don't know how many design schools, how many architectural colleges are really thinking about the people who run the school, for instance, right? Like the service providers and their own college. When I was studying in my college, we never thought about, what does design mean for a security guard or a waste picker who's actually coming to our college, and we are passing, them by very often, maybe interacting with them. And I think these things don't really occur very naturally to us. Questions of class, caste, gender. And I think over time, perhaps this is changing as architects are also beginning to ask these questions. Well, at least the younger generation, I think I have a lot of faith in. And I think the reason as architectural students, we were not expected to ask these questions, and architects maybe typically don't ask these questions, is because I think architecture is a very elitist profession, at least as it exists today. And also, who are the people who are practicing architecture are also people who have had access to services, who have had access to design education, which a large part of my country doesn't have, a large part of perhaps your countries also doesn't have. And I think the more we have underrepresented groups also getting access to architectural education, I think the more inclusive the architectural field will become, and the more inclusive then our cities will become, the more inclusive our design will become. If it's only upper caste men who are designing our cities, what kind of cities are we creating? What kind of public spaces are we creating? You go out and you see it's mostly occupied by men. And when I say this, people are like, no, there are also women out there. And I've been, again, very fortunate to work with collaborators such as Chris Blash, who's an anthropologist from Paris. And what she has told me is, Swati, always look for the numbers, go for the data. And so what we encourage our students to do is maybe just, observe a public space for an hour and just count the number of men who are sitting there, count the number of women who are passing by, who are sitting there. And immediately what might seem like an inclusive sort of scenario becomes very unequal. And so if this is the way our public spaces are, and of course, it's a sort of a representation of what is also happening within the home, right? The social inequality which exists within the home in our society is manifested in our cities. But I think design can play a huge role in that. And who's designing our cities? Who's sitting in the planning authorities? Who's sitting in positions of power? Who's the decision maker? Has a lot to say in the way we design our cities and the way we design our buildings. And the more diverse and more inclusive that becomes, the more the number of women, the more the number of transgender people, the more the number of people from Dalit backgrounds in India, which is very caste-based. My country is very caste-based, even though that was abolished a long time back, but it's still very much a part of our daily lives. And so the more the representation from different groups of people, I think the better and more inclusive design and architecture as fields, as disciplines are going to be. And definitely, I think the built environment is going to be. Yeah.
Thank you for that. A very interesting point that you said is, because this is a challenge that I ask myself so much about, is that because we are seeing some kind of a change, right? Like some companies or some cities or some areas are going to for a more inclusive approach. I don't know how genuine that approach is, but at least they're trying, right?
Yeah.
And that's what bothers me, is that when you start pinpointing those negative things or the things that we need to change, a lot of the scenarios that you hear back, or the reply or the feedback, is that, oh, we're already changing. But even if we are already starting to adapt to a change, doesn't mean that we just have to stop there. Like there's still problems with the approaches of how we're approaching inclusivity, or like gender neutral, or all those issues that our city are facing. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that. Really.
Yeah, and I think it makes a lot of difference if people are trying. And I think often what happens is we're also very critical of people who are trying because it's not good enough. But I would also be critical of people who are not even trying. And I think especially when it comes to feminism, I think I just forget feminism. I think in general there's a lot of what we call cancel culture, right? As soon as we look at something which is not working, then we are like, oh, but this is wrong, this is bad. And I think so I was giving the example of feminism because I think many people get it wrong what feminism is. It's about gender equality, and I think there is a lot of tokenism in the name of feminism. But at the same time, I think we all need to be working together. There are certain sort of networks of allyship we need to be building, and even though it's not perfect, I'm a believer in a sort of step-by-step change. So, like you said, if some people are even pretending to try, for me, that's a step. A lot of people don't agree with me because they're like, hey, if you're pretending to try, might as well not even try. I think at any level, if you're able to push the envelope, we should try and then.
Of course, because that's how we're going to learn. Like even of whoever tried, right? And let's say it doesn't have to work, it failed, but that's the next person that's going to take a next approach. It's going to learn from other people's trials. That's only
and we encourage people who are trying, and we also tell them, hey, you can do this in a better way, but kudos, like good job for trying, right? I mean, we don't have to like really really celebrate it and say, wow, this is amazing. We can say there is so much scope for improvement, but it's great that you're trying.
100%.
Yeah, and also I think creating a conversation with the ones who are in the post of privilege. I mean, okay, the same way that we don't have access to a specific kind of privileges, the people who had access, so many of the people who had access to privileges, it wasn't that it was a choice. So many people just had it because of how the system works. And I think like having this conversation that this is about sharing the privilege, this is about sharing what you have and not wanting to, steal a certain kind of privilege. I think it's also important because I think so much of the fear from making this change comes also that, okay, if the women have the privilege also, or if the other genders have the privilege also, we are going to lose it. So creating this conversation that we all want to have it. It's not that we want to take it from you, but we all want to have it. It can be also important, like to take away that fear that sometimes might exist in our societies.
Yeah, and I think those people you should call out. If people don't want to share their privilege, feel free to call those people out.
We're getting the courage to get there.
So I'm gonna, I think, wrap up with this question with you that is a bit more also personal to me and Hadil. I think it might be the struggle that maybe so many people, especially young people, are starting to go towards more, let's say, social design or social work might have. And I hear this, let's say, narrative also from people that are close to me, that they care about me, you know, that from the utmost love, they tell me that maybe nonprofit work or social design work, I don't know, it's not a job, or you can't improve in it so much, you know, this negative narrative that is about social work, about nonprofit organizations. And sometimes I even hear that it's a waste of talent if you, instead of, I don't know, creating these huge important buildings, you put your time, I don't know, in investing in, I don't know, low-income communities or the real issues that actually exist in the world. So we wanted to ask your ideas about these issues, and have you ever had issues like this, and have you ever questioned the importance of social work and what you're doing, especially in the powered system that we are living today? And do you think it can affect the improvement of the work of nonprofit organizations, because there is always so much pressure from the society, you know, having these negative ideas about social work?
I don't know if it's negative as much as I think people think it's unimportant, right? So yeah, I've definitely faced the same thing. I think everyone does, from our friends, our family, leave alone like strangers, people who care about us, they're like, when will you get a real job? As if like what we're doing is like not a job enough, right? But I think that's okay. People need to learn, and I think somehow we have been lucky enough to have had that exposure or experience, right? That we have been able to critically look at something and say, hey, this is not right. Hey, this is not working, right? And I think maybe they haven't seen it that way, which is fine. But I can imagine that it feels lonely, and so that's why it's so important to create these sort of networks of solidarity and understanding, which is, I think, what you're trying to do with your podcast as well, right? And which is what architecture and development does, and really what keeps me going. And I say this a lot of times, but maybe not often enough, is the collectives that I'm a part of. Like, the power of collectives is immense, and I draw so much strength from that. So I think anything that I have managed to do, mostly in Delhi, because that's where I've been working for the past few years, and I have great sort of relationships with people, built on a lot of trust. And so everything that we have done is, as a part of a collective, as a part of a network, which has people from different backgrounds, right? So very few architects. Many times I'm the only architect in that sort of a group. And so actually, I think I don't interact with architects much, as much as I interact with people from other fields, because I can't relate, I think, to architecture. Even though even though I'm an architect and I'm using my architectural training, I am a non-architect, or I'm not. Many times I think not building is important, right? Knowing when to build and knowing when not to build is so important. And so mostly I relate to architects who don't practice architecture in that way, in the mainstream way anymore. And of course, I relate to a lot of other people from different backgrounds who are working towards the same goal that we are working towards, which is housing rights, social justice, right to the city, etc. And so I think people who don't understand that, I just say, it's okay, take your time. But I think meanwhile, it's so important for you to create that circle for yourself, to create that network for yourself, because it really helps you believe further in what you're doing. Because of course, we're all social animals, and we need that constant sort of exchange of ideas. So yeah, I think there were one or two things I wanted to say, but now I think I've lost my thread. But I just want to say that it gets better with time. Because right now you're trying something which feels very like different from what anyone else is doing, and I can imagine it's challenging. Many people also try to put you down, like when some people have told me that, social design is for people who are not good at designing, right? Because you don't really have to think so much about detailing or architectural tectonics, and that's not true. I think detailing is a very important part of it, but that's the thing. That's the whole sort of design ego, or like the sort of like the design centric approach that we all have, right? We want to create these what are we calling them, iconic buildings, which are more about us than anything else, but comes from that place. So I think people are going to say a lot of things, but there are also other people who are going to understand what you're saying and who are going to, I think, also validate that, they agree with you on many things. They think like you on many things. And at the end of the day, what matters is what you can show for it, meaning to say what it has led to, right? So, I mean, if I see a space where children are able to study better, a space where they find it safer and even like more beautiful than a space that they've had before or actually haven't had before, or I see maybe in terms of planning or policy some changes which we've been able to bring about after years of work, then you feel like, okay, I'm doing something right. But it does take I mean, it's like one small win in a few months or a few years. I mean, so it is challenging. Yeah, I agree there. So I guess keep talking to others like yourself. But deep down, I think you feel like you're doing the right thing and you feel satisfied, right? And I think that's what's important.
But I think, Swati, I would like to add to that because I want to get your input on that. And I speak based on my experience or based on what my knowledge is. So I come from a country, like I come from Lebanon, right? So Lebanon is very governed by policies and politicians and religion and so many factors that people they don't have control over, right? So, and I see that narrative happening a lot in marginalized communities, where when people want to take action and they want to take change, they feel that they're limited because of those power dynamics. So there's this narrative that, don't even waste, like this is a waste of time for you to be trying because there's going to be always roadblocks stopping you from moving forward. And I guess, I don't know if it's all because of the connections and the networks you have, but if you were to give us an advice for someone that's trying to come up with solutions and ideas and knowing that there's going to be a lot of roadblocks happening in their journey, like what would be your words of encouragement or advice on how to tackle situations like this when you're dealing with a system and power dynamics that it's way more complicated than we think it is?
I think there may be different approaches to this, and I think everyone chooses the approach that they're more comfortable with. I think working at a policy level has really made me feel that maybe that can really lead to the sort of long-term and the deeper sort of change that I really think is important. Because, the work that we have been doing, like even the school that we built, it's a very sort of quick solution, but it's really like not the root of the problem, right? It's like, okay, you're treating the symptom. The school was demolished, so you built one, but actually it's a band-aid solution, right? And so over time, what I realized is that we need to be looking at why the farmers are being removed in the first place. And at a policy level, at a planning level, what's happening? And then you realize that, oh, actually there's a riverfront development plan. There's a riverfront development plan which says that parks and jogging tracks and cycling tracks need to be built here instead. And so then you're like, okay, why is that happening? And then you realize there is this whole approach to world-class cities, right, which is happening across the world. And then all the cities are trying to look like each other, where Delhi is trying to look like Dubai, Dubai is trying to look like Tokyo, Tokyo is trying to look like New York. And we're really, heading towards this sort of placeless identity, right? And so then it's really important to look at the bigger picture. And then when I started kind of studying the policies which dictate urban development, the different housing policies, and then because we also work with street vendors, looking at the Street Vendor Act, the street vendor policy, then I realized that it's so important to be also engaging at that level, right, which is a top-down level. And I think architects also need to be working there, but again, it depends on what you would like to, what is your area of interest as well. And so in our approach, it's a dual approach, working at a sort of a grassroots level as well as at a policy level. But maybe your approach might be different. You realize that maybe I'm more interested in working from a law perspective, from a legal perspective, right? And I think there was again, I'm losing my thread a lot today. I'm sorry. I guess I'm really tired. But the policy is one. But Okay, I think it will come to me later. Oh yeah, okay, it is back. Working with civil society. So when you're saying that people feel like they're trapped in this whole system which doesn't work for them, I feel like there are many people who are trying to change that. And at least in India, the civil society is playing a very important role. In Delhi, especially, I think they're playing a huge sort of role where the government is not always very pro-poor. So yeah, there I see lots of models which are working, and then I try to learn what can be adopted, right? And then maybe you see Lebanon. I mean, there must be things which are working, right, for social change. I'm sure there are some templates, some approaches which where you see that okay, there is positive change, and what can your architectural practice learn from that, or how can you engage with that is something that maybe you want to figure out. Does that make any sense? Does that help at all?
It does a lot. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay, great. And good luck. I can see that, this means a lot to you as well. And right now there are lots of questions, which is good. I will say that the questions don't go away with time, but I think they become a bit easier for sure, because, you've answered those questions before and you figured out the answers yourself, right? So then when you are talking to someone in a podcast, right, you've already thought about those questions and talked about those questions, had fights on those questions with your friends and, non-friends, and then you've arrived at your own answer. And I hope
we give the conclusion.
Sorry?
We are here just to give the conclusion, like the end process of our all the questionings or the spirals that goes in our heads.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Wow. I think the time passed really quickly.
Yeah.
And we're coming towards the end of our conversation, actually. But before we end this on a beautiful note, is there anything you would like to tell us more about social, like the initiative that you're working on? I know Nishtha and Anushka, they mentioned a couple of the projects that you are working on, but if you can tell the listeners, where can we connect with you? How can we find you? And anything that you'd like to add?
Okay, so we are called Social Design Collaborative, and you can find us on different social media platforms. We also have a website. But I guess what I would like to conclude with is what perhaps you might want to do in your own space, in your own city. I mean, how we started is really because, it just felt like, okay, things are not really fair, in our city. And especially, I really love my city. I love Delhi. And then when you see something which is not just, right, it's unfair, it's unequal, then you feel like, hey, this is my city and it should not be happening here. You want to do something about it because it's very personal. And I think if you feel the same in your neighborhood, in your community, towards your city, towards any sort of a group or place you are in, I would encourage you to do something about it, because often that becomes the sort of starting point, right? For a bigger sort of a movement, a bigger practice, a bigger process. And even though we are very critical of the government that we work with, we also engage with the planning authorities, we're also very critical of them. And I think it's great that they also engage with us, because I guess that's a very open-minded sort of approach that many officials have. Again, losing my thread. Oh my God.
It's almost 7 p.m. at your end, so
yeah.
I still have a long way to go, by the way. I'm working till late. My team is left. But what I was saying is that so often, I was talking about being critical of the government, because often we feel that, hey, this is not wrong and this is what they should be doing, this is what should happen. And sometimes if you try to find the solution yourself in whatever little way you can, you don't feel very helpless because you're doing something about it, and B, actually maybe you start something which can actually go on to become a model or a pilot or a small project which others can learn from. And as soon as people see something which is good, something which is helpful, people join. Because I think at the root of us, and I'm going to become a bit sentimental here, that the root of humanity is the urge to help each other, really, because survival depends on it. right? If we want to survive, we have to help, each other. And so when you see something where something good is happening to help others, people join. And before you know it, it becomes something. Before you know it, maybe even the planning authorities want to pick it up or talk to you to figure out how you did it. So wherever you are, I think just take up something. If you see something you don't agree with, do something about it. And I think that's how social design collaborators started.
Yeah.
Love it. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
Thank you
So much
Thank you for your time.
being here, really, even though you have still a lot of hours to work now. So thank you so much for being with us
Pleasure.
and giving us your time. So have a great rest of the night and have a great work. And thanks again. See you.
Okay, then. Yeah. Good night.
Bye.
And good luck with your initiative.
Thank you.
I will follow. Okay, for sure.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.